Welcome back, everyone. Again, I just want to remember that if you have questions for Adi, please leave those questions umbrella on the chat on the side of the streaming. Adi, welcome to Porto Cup 2021. We are very happy to have you here. And I believe you will be talking about a very hot topic nowadays, right? About blockchain.
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much, Samuel. So it's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm guessing you're ready to start. I will just pass the stage back to you. Please introduce yourself and feel free to start the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Samuel. So it's great to be here. It's a shame, of course, the conference is online and not in person. Last time we did it in person, and it was great. So we look forward to that happening again in the future. So yeah, I guess to introduce myself, I'm Adi Ben-Ari. I'm founder and CEO of a company called Applied Blockchain. We operate. We've been operating since 2015 in the blockchain space. And most of our development team is based in Porto or the surrounding area. And in this presentation today, I wanted to really give an update because the area of blockchain is really heated up and there's a lot that's happened in the last 18 months. And I wanted to give an update from our perspective as developers, what that looks like and what it means. So I'll start a little bit, just a couple of minutes about the company. So I guess, where do we come from and what gives me the right to talk about the subject? So we're a team, as I said, that's been building blockchain-based solutions since 2015. We started in the UK, where we have, I think it's 13 people now, and then in 2018 we moved to Porto, and we've been growing the team in Porto ever since. We're 63 people now. So it's 50 or so in Portugal and the Porto area, and we're going to be 70 by the end of the year. So the company has been growing very, very quickly. Just to give an idea, we had 15 people, or between 15 and 20, going into COVID. So we've grown 3x in the last 12, 18 months, and at the moment it's continuing to grow in the same way. The reason it's growing is because there's a lot of activity in the blockchain space. I'm going to talk to a little bit why that is. But yeah, just a little bit about our operation in Porto. So we have an office in Batala, in the center of Porto, and our team is based there, although right now most of the team is working remotely. But we have the office, and we meet at the office. We bring people over from the UK as well, and we have events there. Here I have some photos from a recent training that we did for the whole team in blockchain in the Porto office. Our team is mainly made up of full stack developers, front end, back end, and JavaScript, and then of course the blockchain work, which I'll describe shortly. We have our office manager is Claudia, so I've misspelled her name here, but it's Claudia Neves, and she's our manager in Portugal, in Porto. So if you have any questions about the company, you can reach out to her as well. And the final slide about the company, these are some of the clients that we've worked with over the years. So I would say for the first 2 or 3 years, and this is probably a reflection of the blockchain industry in general, there was a lot of work that we did with enterprises. So we worked with big banks, energy companies, automotive, aviation, supply chain, and so on. We worked with some of the biggest companies also in telecoms. Then the last 2 years or so, it's really been a massive growth in the what we call the public blockchain or the crypto space. There's been an explosion there, and I'm going to describe some of that in the coming slides. But our work has shifted really from focus on kind of startups and enterprise and more of that field to really operating on the fast-growing developments in crypto and around it. So you can see some of the NFT marketplaces that we've been involved in, and there is music marketplaces, there's physical art for NFTs. There's some of the digital art with some of the top digital artists in the world, and we have Fine Wines marketplace, again NFT based. So a lot of different developments. We work with Chainlink, which is one of the biggest companies in the DeFi space, and so on. And also, it's probably worth mentioning over here on the left, Algorand is a big partner of ours as well. So while most of the activity in blockchain still is around Ethereum, there's a growing number of other blockchains which are emerging, which are taking some of the applications and traffic from Ethereum as Ethereum becomes too expensive and too slow for many use cases. Right, so that was really just a quick bit of background, but now I'll get to the material of the presentation. So just as a quick introduction, what is blockchain and how do we view it? So for us, it's really a distributed database where the reason to distribute the database is to enable a group of parties to secure the history of the database, more so than if it was just one party doing that on its own. Right? So just the fact that the group is looking after the history of the database makes it harder for anyone to try and change the historical records in the database. Okay? And that group security, as we would call it, that's really the value of blockchain, right? And that's really it. Everything else is really built on top of that. It's probably very important to mention that when we talk about group security through blockchain, we're not talking about access to the data. We're not talking about making the data private. All we're talking about is the ability to change the data and the historical data. Okay, that's the thing that's made more secure. When you have a group looking after data and making sure it isn't changed, then why would you spend more money and more resource to make a database more secure, right? Or to make the history of the database more secure? It's usually when the value that's represented by the data in that database is high, right? So if the data shows that I own my house, then and if that data was to show something else, then I wouldn't own my house anymore. Then it's worth, for me at least, to spend a bit more money to make the infrastructure that makes it hard to change that record. It's worth spending a bit more money to secure that, right? And that's really where blockchain comes in as a record of asset ownership. And so that's really, again, the primary use of blockchain technology across the space. A more secure record of asset ownership, where an individual sysadmin or somebody with access to a machine or to a database, an administrator in a company, or even the company's management and CEO and so on, would not be able to change records on their own unilaterally. So a company can't just change who owns something on its own, because technically it's secured by a group. And that's why we see it, and we see the value in blockchain being used as an asset registry. Now, what types of assets do we have on a blockchain? Well, obviously the first asset that we had on the blockchain was Bitcoin itself, which is a natively digital asset. And the interesting thing for us with Bitcoin was that it's really the asset itself is a way of paying for transaction fees on the network, and it's also a way for rewarding the parties who are hosting the Bitcoin database, otherwise known as miners. And in this case, the token itself, the coin, the digital asset, is really an outsourcing payment, right? You pay a transaction fee for a transaction to happen on the Bitcoin blockchain, and what you're really doing is you're paying to reward the parties that are doing the hosting of the infrastructure. So it's effectively outsourced infrastructure, right? And the reason you're happy to pay such a big group is because you believe you're getting more security for the historical records that are on there. So that was kind of how we view Bitcoin. And then Ethereum came along, and with Ethereum we got the ability to create not just to have the native asset, which is used to pay for the infrastructure, the outsourced infrastructure, on Ethereum, we have ETH, but on top of that, we also have smart contracts where we can define new assets that reside on top, and also the rules about when those assets should move, right? And this is really the smart contracts. This is what we get with Ethereum. And then in Ethereum, as people started to code these smart contracts and define what their assets might look like, standards started to emerge. So people said, look, if you define your assets using a standard interface, then other people and other applications can process those assets. For example, an exchange can allow the asset to be bought and sold if it can interface with it. And so the ERC20 standard emerged and became very popular. And we call this a fungible token because the asset itself is a large number of the assets can be created, and all of the individual assets are identical, right? So it's a little bit like coins, if you like. These are, you can have 10,000 or 10 billion, and they're all the same, right? They're interchangeable. And a second standard emerged and got traction, which is what we call ERC721, which is similar to the ERC20, except that each asset is unique. So there isn't a concept of all the assets being identical and interoperable or interchangeable. One ERC721 is not the same as another ERC721. They have unique identities, and therefore they can have different prices as well. And then one of the first uses of the what we call now the non-fungible tokens, this was actually pre the ERC721 standard, is a project called CryptoPunks, where somebody created I think it was 10,000 of these images, and people were able to own them and have them in their wallets, and have a unique token that represents one of these images. Now, of course, they're worth a ridiculous amount of money, but this was really the birth of the NFT. And then a more sophisticated version of the NFT we saw in a project called CryptoKitties, which almost brought down the Ethereum network at the time. And here we have a non-fungible token, which is a bit more intelligent in the sense that if two non-fungible tokens are owned by people, they can be merged, if you like. They can do what's called in the application, they can mate. And from these two non-fungible tokens, they'll be mixed and they'll emerge, they'll be born a new kitty, a new token. And it works, the smart contract code treats the kitties, it's almost like DNA. So we have the properties of one token and the properties of another, and they go through this mating process, and the new token is effectively a child with some of the properties of the parents. So people started getting really creative with these tokens and with the way that what the tokens represent and how they're created and so on. And this evolved and really exploded in the last 18 months, almost 2 years now, with the explosion of artists uploading digital artwork and selling them as non-fungible tokens. One of the first, and today I think by far the biggest marketplace, is called OpenSea. And OpenSea is on Ethereum and allows non-fungible tokens, artwork, and the things that are represented by the NFTs to be bought and sold in an open marketplace. Now, an interesting thing about the way OpenSea works is so actually I'll just say a couple of things about the NFT itself. NFTs are just a record of ownership, right, for one of these non-fungible assets. Now, they're not necessarily a legal record of ownership. They're just a technical handle on something, right? And they're just, when I say technical handle, what we basically have is a record of ownership that points to some media. And the way it points to it is simply by holding a hash of it, right? So what normally happens is we have the media itself, which might be a picture, a video, some music or something. We create a hash from that media asset, and the hash is stored on the blockchain against a blockchain address, a wallet. So that's basically an indication that somebody owns the digital art or the digital asset. Now, the blockchain doesn't actually hold the digital asset, right? And there's still nothing stopping the digital asset, the digital artwork, for example, from being replicated. So anybody can take the file, copy it, and so on. The blockchain doesn't stop that, right? And as I said, the blockchain record doesn't necessarily have any legal implications either. All it is a record of ownership. And if people respect that record of ownership and give it credibility, then other people will use it and use it as the mechanism for recording ownership of something. And that way, trading and buying and selling of that something is enabled on the blockchain. And that's really what's happened in the last 18 months. It's that large portions of the art world and the crypto world have adopted these tokens as a way of representing owning something digital, which was something very difficult to represent before because the digital stuff can just be copied. So because this is now a unique record that people recognize as ownership of something digital, all of these marketplaces and all of this activity has really emerged and sprung up. So saying an interesting thing with OpenSea is it's what we call a non-custodial marketplace. And that really reflects two models that we have for handling and for offering a marketplace for these non-fungible tokens. The custodial model, which is a bit like I guess a regular crypto exchange, is we have on a bit like you could argue a stock exchange or something like that. It's a centralized entity, and the centralized entity holds the keys of ownership, right? And that means that if I go to that marketplace and I buy something, I don't need to have a crypto wallet because in fact my assets are being held by the exchange, right? And the advantage of that is it takes out some of the friction because the users of the platform, of the marketplace, don't need to be crypto native. They don't need to know how to use crypto wallets, right? Because they won't need to deal with them themselves. They'll just be able to go through the website to make maybe a card payment, and then they'll see that the asset is with them. But in practice, the asset will be held by the exchange. And so it takes away some of the friction, but it adds some security issues because those assets can be stolen from the exchange if the exchange is compromised. And this is exactly what has happened with many crypto exchanges over the years. So there's a compromise there between user experience on the one hand versus security on the other. So OpenSea is an example of a non-custodial exchange, and that means that OpenSea itself doesn't hold the actual assets. So it doesn't hold the keys, it doesn't hold the wallets, and so the digital art and the assets never reside with OpenSea itself, right? What they do is they reside with the buyer or the seller in their crypto wallet. And the most popular crypto wallet is a wallet called MetaMask on Ethereum. And MetaMask works primarily as a Chrome extension. And you can install it and then you can use it to interact with some of these marketplaces. And MetaMask also has a mobile app version now, which can be used. So OpenSea uses MetaMask. And so if I want to buy or sell or do anything on OpenSea, I need to install MetaMask, which will then be my wallet with my crypto funds and my NFTs. And so I have an NFT which sits with me in my crypto wallet. I present that to OpenSea and I can put it up for sale. And then someone else can come and buy. They'll have to pay from their crypto wallet through a smart contract that will then manage swapping the payment from them with the NFT which I'm selling. And the contract itself will actually wait till it's got both. It will hold them both in escrow, and then it will release the NFT to the buyer and the payment to the seller. So OpenSea itself doesn't handle the funds and it doesn't handle the assets, right? These are all handled through a smart contract. And the advantage of this is security. So OpenSea itself doesn't doesn't deal with the money or the assets in many cases. And the buyer and the seller don't need to depend on OpenSea's security because everything has just happened directly between their wallet and the blockchain. A marketplace which also based on Ethereum, which has taken the opposite approach, is one called Nifty Gateway. And in Nifty, it is a custodial marketplace. So here, users will just sign up like they would with a regular cloud-based web application. They sign up, create accounts, see things that they like and shop for them and buy them, just like they would with any e-commerce site. And behind the scenes, Nifty Gateway has its keys, its wallet, where it holds the things that people are buying, and it's holding them on their behalf. And the payment is just handled directly by the marketplace. So the marketplace has more liability, and the user experience is much easier. But yeah, it's riskier for the buyers and sellers themselves because their assets can be stolen. I'm just wondering about questions. We haven't really set out. I guess for Q&A, if anyone has got any questions on these subjects, because I do go into a fair amount of detail, please post them in the chat, and I'll see if it's relevant. I'll try to answer as we go along. If not, then I can address questions at the end. Okay, so we talked about.
I will relay all the questions to you. Don't worry, Adi. Do you prefer me to stack them and ask all at once at the end, or interrupt you during?
Yeah, I think it's probably better to interrupt because we're going from subject to subject, and before we close off different subjects, if people have questions, it would be great to, there's probably a lot of other people thinking the same thing. It'd be good to then address the questions. Okay.
Thank you.
So I guess just to close off in terms of the subject, really what we've covered here is two different types of NFT marketplaces: the custodial marketplace, the non-custodial marketplace, and the custodial marketplace. And the other thing that's really needs to be noted for these two marketplaces in particular, and for NFTs in general, is that they generally deal with digital media, right? So the NFTs really has solved the problem for ownership of digital media, and so that's really what we see here. And that's the main focus of OpenSea, and also the main focus of Nifty. Again, it doesn't stop the digital media from being copied. It doesn't necessarily give legal rights, but it gives a kind of ownership handle, which is then respected and used by the users of these marketplaces. Another really important property of the NFT is that it lives on the blockchain. It doesn't live in the marketplace, right? And when I say it lives, I mean the record of ownership, not necessarily the digital media, right? So the record of ownership, which is the token that sits in somebody's wallet, is recorded on the blockchain. And the idea is that as an owner of something, you're not tied to a specific marketplace, right? So unlike other marketplaces, centralized marketplaces, which you might use today, if there's a record that says that I own a particular piece of digital art, even if I bought it on Nifty Gateway and Nifty Gateway disappears tomorrow, the record is still there that says that I own digital art. And actually, I can take it to another marketplace, or I can trade it directly with other people without the marketplace at all, right? So this is really the value of the blockchain, is that this ownership, this record lives beyond one organization. And actually, the record stays there as long as the blockchain is there, right? And we expect these blockchains to be around for a long time because the incentives are there for the hosts of the different copies of the blockchain database to continue hosting. So that's these digital assets. It's interesting to note, though, that the digital media itself is usually hosted on the websites of these marketplaces. And so if the marketplace were to disappear, you would have the record in the blockchain that might say that your wallet owns some digital art, but the art might not be found anywhere, right? Because the art was just hosted on one of these marketplaces and now it's disappeared. So the solution, you just need to be aware of that. So you want to download the art and have a copy. Some marketplaces will use a decentralized storage platform like IPFS, which allows media to be decentralized and distributed across different and replicated across different nodes. So it's much safer and it doesn't go down if one party disappears. But just to be aware that the artwork itself is never stored on the blockchain, and so it doesn't mean that the artwork will live forever. It's just a record of ownership. Okay. So as I said, this is mainly for digital art. Now, what about physical art? So we get a lot of people that come to us who might be dealers or owners of famous Picassos and pieces of physical art, and they say, right, I want to create an NFT that goes next to my physical art that proves that the physical art is authentic, right? And maybe continues alongside the physical art so we can prove who owns it over time, right? From our perspective, this is nonsense, right? Because there's only one asset that can be represented at any one time, right? So for example, if you have a physical painting and you have an NFT representing that physical painting, that physical painting I could just take the physical painting and I can go and give it to my friend or give it to my family or sell it to someone without updating the NFT record. Or similarly, I could keep a physical painting in my house, go and update the NFT record as if it's been sold, but the physical painting never moves. So actually, there really is no way or no easy way of linking a physical object with a digital record. And we could ask people to voluntarily update the digital record on a sale, but they might also choose not to do it. So there's no easy way to have a digital record and a physical object that are in sync, right? And that means that if you have an NFT of a physical painting, really the NFT is worthless, because only one of these can really be traded at any one point in time, right? And what I mean is, if you've got the physical painting and that can be bought and sold, there's no point in buying or selling the NFT because the physical painting has its own separate existence. So these are two different things, and it's really, I think it's a mistake to think that you can create one to follow to mirror the other and enable the NFT to be traded as if it was the real painting. So an interesting way to illustrate this is a project which involves an artist called Damien Hurst. He's probably one of the top 3 artists in the UK, living artists in the UK, and probably among the top living artists in the world. So Damien Hurst creates physical art, and he created a project a few months ago called The Currency. And in The Currency, he created 10,000 prints, right? So these are regular pieces of art on a canvas, and they look like this, right? So there's a bunch of dots, and that's the painting. And 10,000 of these paintings were created. Each one has a unique number, which you can see here, and a phrase which is written on the back of it, signed by the artist. And the 10,000 physical pieces were all put in a vault, right? So the marketplace, which in this case is called Henny, has a vault, and that vault holds 10,000 pieces of Damien Hurst art. Now, on the last day of July this year, Henny launched the NFTs for this artwork. So for every unique piece of physical art, they created a digital NFT. And it's a one-to-one relationship. Now, because the physical art is being held in a vault and the physical art can't be moved, the NFT can represent the physical art and can be bought and sold, right? And the reason is because if the NFT changes from one wallet to another, the new owner of the NFT can go back to Henny and say, can I please have the physical art from the vault? And Henny will say, here you go, right? And they'll give the physical art and they'll burn the digital NFT, right? And from that point on, the physical art can be bought and sold, but the NFT doesn't exist anymore. So here you have two states, right? You have the state where the physical is locked up and can't be moved. And in the meantime, the digital record, the NFT, can be bought and sold. And then if those are switched, if they're converted, then the NFT can no longer move, it no longer exists, and the physical art can be bought and sold, right? So the important point is you can't do both at the same time, right? If you've got an NFT and a physical piece, only one should be tradable at any one point in time, right? And in order to make the NFT tradable, the physical needs to be in custody. So that's how this project has been designed. Initially, the NFTs were sold, 10,000 NFTs, and 2 months later, which has already happened, people have been able to come and claim the physical piece in exchange for the NFT. And 12 months after the initial launch, if NFTs are out there and people haven't converted them and haven't claimed the physical art will be burnt, right? And so in 12 months' time, there'll be no physical art held in the vault, right? It'll either be converted to NFTs or, it'll either be converted, as in people will cash in their NFTs and take the physical art, or the NFTs will remain in existence, but the physical art will no longer, that was in the vault will be burnt. So this again illustrates the fact that we don't have the two tradable at any one time, right? You can either trade NFTs with physical in the vault, or you can trade physical, but then there's no NFT, right? And this is really a key principle of how this can work, and an important point to understand.
Adi, maybe now it's a good time to ask you two questions we have.
Yep.
The first questions from Paul Souza. How about the house market and deed registration?
Sorry, how about the art market?
The house market?
The house market.
And deed
registration. Yeah. So it's a great question. So the question, I mentioned that the blockchain is a registry, right? It's a place where we register asset ownership. Now, it only really works if it is the registry, right? In other words, by moving an asset on the blockchain from one wallet to another, does that mean that the actual asset ownership has changed, right? If it doesn't, because there's a legal piece of paper that needs to be signed or exchanged or whatever, or because there's a government registry that needs to be updated, then actually the blockchain doesn't really represent the ownership of the asset, right? Because I could move my house now to the record to somebody else on the blockchain, but they won't be able to get to my house because the government registration says that I'm the owner of the house. So the blockchain record is meaningless, right? It's only meaningful if the blockchain record is the master ownership record, right? And then we can, by actually trading or moving something on the blockchain, you actually change the ownership. So in the case of real estate, in most countries, the registry of ownership sits with the government, right? In the UK, we have a land registry. I'm not sure what you have in Portugal, actually, but I assume it's something similar. And this is a government registry where if you buy or sell a property, then the government registry gets updated, right? And this is done by lawyers. And this is really the ownership record of the property in the country. Of course, we have also legal papers and deeds and so on. Now, until those get migrated to a blockchain to the point where the blockchain represents the real ownership of the property, then trading on a blockchain will be meaningless, right? And holding an asset in your wallet will be meaningless. So that's really the prerequisites. That's how it has to work. And that's why it's very difficult to migrate ownership of real estate assets where they're registered with the government and the government still holds those records.
My question is: do you think that will ever happen? Because doesn't the government lost its control over that kind of stuff?
First of all, I think just like with crypto and everything blockchain, different governments take different approaches, right? So you see, let's say, more developed countries, more advanced economies and so on, maybe being more centralized, and maybe smaller jurisdictions, island jurisdictions and so on being more open to experiment, right, and having more flexibility. So there are some economies, very small economies, where there's already this type of experimentation and even movement to a blockchain-based record. So I think it can happen. it's a bit like another subject which is hot right now, which is central bank digital currency, right? You know, does it money at the end of the day is just another type of asset, right? Does the government want ownership of money to be recorded on a blockchain infrastructure, right? Some governments think this will be a competitive advantage for the country. Others think it'll be a disaster for all sorts of reasons. So, you know, it's a huge open debate with lots of different aspects and complexities and so on. I think personally that if you transact assets on a blockchain, you get two things. You get technical efficiency, because the asset can move in an instant, right? And the really special thing is you can move asset and money together in one transaction, right? And I don't need a middleman. So, for example, if the property, if a house in Portugal was, if the blockchain was really a registry for the ownership of the house in Portugal, and I come along with the money, I move the money into a smart contract. The seller moves the property record into the smart contract. The smart contract sees it's got both, and then it gives me the, you know, it gives the buyer the asset and the seller the money. That happens with no intermediary, right? And that happens with no risk, right? With no risk of, you know, you don't need an escrow or a lawyer holding the funds and the property and so on in the middle to manage the process. So that's super efficient. That's technical efficient. Yeah.
But then you will not have those people making money. Because
okay, but you know, you don't have people writing accounting books anymore, right? They'll use Excel. What can we do? You know, it's this is efficiency, right?
Yeah.
I think it's very difficult to fight efficiency, and I think this is efficiency of transacting value, right? And I don't think I don't think we have a more efficient mechanics than the blockchain for exchanging value right now, right? And so I think it technically it's super efficient, and that's why I think it will take more and more, become more and more useful and widely used. How things are managed, this is really lots of questions, right? And governments, you know, some governments will set some rules and they'll be more comfortable with it. Other governments will not know how to deal with it and will just ban it, as we've seen with China and so on, right? So personally, I think the more sophisticated economies, or the more, let's say, the more open economies, will embrace the technology, but will have and embrace competitive entities running the technology, but will regulate it with whatever regulation they feel they need, right? Rather than managing it all centrally. But let's see. It's if you haven't worked it out yet, it's very, very early days in the blockchain space, right? It's still baby steps.
So let me just move to the other. We have two more questions, and let me go really quickly over them. Rui Magalhães asks, do you think MetaMask is the best approach to serve a blockchain products to clients that don't care about the private keys? Is there an alternative to ease this initial barrier of key management?
Yeah, I think this is still an unsolved problem. I mean, you know, I've got family and friends who have been, you know, sometimes we get given NFTs in some of these projects, and I've been, you know, giving them to family and friends and so on. And if they're not from the technology world, it's just impossible for them to use it. Right, literally. I mean, I've spent hours on the phone with relatives and so on. It's with MetaMask, right? It's not an easy thing to use. What we do with some of our solutions is we create custom wallets. We create wallet SDKs that go into applications so that the user experience is much more can be made easier. But the reality is, at the moment, this stuff's pretty complicated, right? Henny, for example, this Damien Hurst project, it runs on a side blockchain called Palm that's attached to the Ethereum blockchain. And the reason for that is because Ethereum is very expensive and slow. So there's a second network that sits next to Ethereum.
But will Ethereum 2 fix that?
Who knows? I've been in the space since 2015, and we've been talking about Ethereum 2, I think at least since 2017. Right? Let's see. But just to give an example here, if you buy this artwork, you'll get the NFT on another blockchain. Then you've got to get MetaMask to work with the other blockchain. Then you've got to move it across if you want to sell it, if you want to cash in, if you've sold it and now you want to get the money. So it's really complicated, right? And so I think there's definitely, this is one of the things that needs to mature, is the user experience around these wallets. There's a lot of people working on it, but some of the fundamentals are still quite hard. And that's also why some of the marketplaces are custodial, right? They just say, you don't need a wallet, we'll take care of the assets for you. And like I said, the user experience is a big part of that. Okay?
Last question from Porto Gamito. What do you think about the applicability of NFTs and the future in the music industry?
Yeah, we actually have a very interesting project in the music space with a company which is allowing people to invest in artists early by buying NFTs from them, and then actually gaining some of the royalties later from the artist. So I think this will be a great mechanism for fans to engage and to also be able to help to finance art and music and so on. I think this is really something special that we can do through the technology. But just be aware that it doesn't stop, it's not a technology that stops people copying. So it's not a way of making sure that everybody that listens to music pays. It's the other way around. It's just a way of collecting payment from those who want to pay, right? And in the case of music, it can be used for an art. It can be used to buy the assets and also as a way of maybe buying things early so that you can help artists and musicians to build their careers, invest in them that way. Okay, so just to quickly move on, because I think we're going to struggle with time. This is what happened with the Damien Hurst sale. So the pieces of art, 10,000 pieces, went on sale for $2,000 each at the end of July, and then the next day they started trading. Right, people started buying and selling them on the market, and 10,000 pieces were sold, but actually 60,000 people registered. So immediately there was demand to buy the NFT, and the NFT, as you can see, within about 2 or 3 weeks, was averaging $60,000. Right? Now, the marketplace takes 5% of this, and the artist gets part of that. Right? So whereas the artist, even an artist like Damien Hurst, would be able to sell art on a website, as he did at the end of July, and get the money for the art that's sold. Here, the next day, there's a secondary market which is very active, which continues to create an earning for the artist on the same pieces, right? Because they're being bought and sold all the time, and there's a commission on the buying and selling, right? So this is a new revenue stream for the artist, right? Which didn't exist before, and in the case of this artist, obviously, it's quite substantial. So, as I said, the first thing that the blockchain brings is technical efficiency. The second thing is liquidity, right? Which means a lot of buyers and sellers, because it's much easier to buy and sell something digital, like digital art, through an NFT, than it would be to try and buy and sell the physical art, right? Where you have to go to a gallery, or you have to go to a dealer, and they have to post it, and so on, right? So the fact that that all the friction has come out from buying and selling this art and these assets, that means that there's a lot more buying and selling happening, a lot more activity, and that also drives price. So whereas the physical art would normally, it was bought for $2,000, it might go up to $3,000 or $4,000 normally from the same artist. With the NFT, it's on a different trajectory. Okay. I'm just aware of time. So another thing that's happened in the space, another development that we've seen mature over the last 2 years, is what we call stablecoins. Stablecoins are representation of fiat money, so government-issued money, in a token on a blockchain. And one of the biggest players in this space is a company called Circle. So they created a token called USDC, where they hold a reserve of US dollars in order to back the coin that they issue, And so you can come along and you can transfer dollars from your account, from your bank account, and receive these tokens. And you can go back afterwards and give the tokens and get back dollars into your bank account. And that means that these dollars can now be used to transact on a blockchain. They can be used to buy or sell assets. They can be used for anything really that you want to be able to do efficiently and securely through a blockchain, right? Whereas before you would have had to have cryptocurrency, here you can do this without the risk of the cryptocurrency going up and down. You can do it with a regular currency. And central bank digital currency is really a government-managed version of this, right? But Circle in this case is a private company in the US. And a variation of this is another project called MakerDAO, which has a stablecoin called DAI. And DAI is also pegged to the dollar, but instead of being based on dollars arriving in a bank account, DAI is based on other digital assets. So it has a basket of digital assets where it manages that basket so that the value of the basket is equivalent to the dollar amount of DAI in distribution, right? And so underneath MakerDAO are other digital assets rather than dollars, but they still have a stable representation of a dollar in the form of their token, which you can use to transact on the network. I'm going to move quickly through some quite complicated subjects, but another really interesting emergence that we've had in the last 18 months in particular is what we call DeFi, or decentralized finance. And DeFi emerged because we have all of these different tokens, and people are buying and selling them and trading them and so on. Now, with buying and selling these tokens, you could do it a bit like the NFTs. You could do this through a centralized exchange, like Coinbase and Kraken and so on. In that case, they're holding the wallet, right? A bit like with the NFT marketplaces. And so if you buy and sell assets, you can do it with your credit card, with your bank account money and so on, but the assets sit with them, right? What we've had emerge is what we call the decentralized exchanges, right? Or DEX. And this is what Uniswap is. And what this essentially is a smart contract where you can put in one token, which you want to swap, and you can get out another token, right? And there's a smart contract which is holding all of these tokens, and the smart contract will give you a price automatically based on its code. So it will hold baskets of effectively pairs of different assets. You come along with one asset, and it will give you the other asset, and the price it sets is based on the volumes and the demand and supply that it sees for the different assets. It's completely decentralized. It's basically a contract that's out there running on its own, and so it's very efficient and very secure because the assets sit in your wallet. Then you put them in the smart contract on the blockchain, and then you get back the other asset directly into your wallet. There's no intermediary, there's no third party, and the smart contract can only do what the code says, right? So unless there's a bug in the code, which does happen occasionally, this type of mechanism is considered very secure. And Uniswap exploded. It holds, I think today it holds something like over $100 billion worth of assets just sitting inside the protocol. And across these types of protocols, we've had over $1 trillion worth of activity in the last 18 months. Okay, so this is Uniswap, and Tinyman is another example of very similar to Uniswap, but on a different blockchain. It's actually on the Algorand blockchain, and I want to use Tinyman. Again, I haven't got too much time here, but just very quickly to illustrate, this is kind of how this looks. So inside the contract, we'll have different assets that are held in the contract because people have deposited them. And there's an algorithm which sets the price based on the demand and supply for in particular, the supply of the different assets, right? And it's basically the amount of one asset times the amount of the other. And this has to be constant. And so if one asset is being removed because it's being bought, the other asset needs to be supplemented so that this equation remains constant. And this is how the price is set. And you can see a sort of example. If I want to buy an asset, one asset A, I'll need a quarter of an asset B in order to keep the total at 2,500, right? And similarly, you can see if I take more, if I want to get one asset B, this is how much asset A I need to give up. And so this is the equation that's used. And the way it's designed, or the thing about it is, the less of the asset there is left in the pool, the higher the price, right? In other words, if something becomes rare, then it becomes more expensive, right? And then we have pool tokens, which is if you become what's called a market maker, so you provide a pair of assets into the pool, so that the pool is then able to provide liquidity, you get rewarded, and you get rewarded with tokens that represent the value in the pool. And so as the pool gets more assets, then the tokens can become more valuable over time through fees collected to use the pool. An extension of these of this swapping activity through a contract is effectively using it to lend, right? To lend and borrow. So if you're putting your tokens into this contract and you're leaving them there, then why shouldn't you be able to earn interest on the tokens that you're leaving there? And if someone else wants the tokens that you've left there, why shouldn't they be able to borrow and pay a bit of interest on those tokens? So that's really what this enables. And the way the risk is managed is if you want to borrow one type of token, you need to put in another token and leave it there as collateral. So if I want to trade in USD and I've got some Ethereum tokens, I can deposit my Ethereum tokens as collateral. That sits with the contract. Borrow the USD, go and trade with the USD, come back, return the USD with a bit of interest, and get back my Ethereum tokens. If I don't pay back, then the contract just keeps my Ethereum tokens that I deposited, right? So that it holds them as collateral. And again, just like the swaps, this is completely decentralized. It's completely automated. It runs in a smart contract. There's nobody that can change anything or interfere with it. Okay, so it's super, super efficient, very basic financial services. But as soon as you start thinking about lending and loans and investors and so on, you can see how we're starting to see the beginning of an alternative financial system, a very efficient one, start to spring up here. And what I'm giving you here is really just a few Lego bricks. This space has exploded in the last 12, 18 months, and there's a whole variety of products that are available through it. And just to close off, we have, if we bring these two worlds together, then what if I have an NFT which is really valuable? Right? Let's say I have an NFT which is worth $1 million now, and it's been bought and sold for $1 million on the blockchain. Why can't I take that NFT and deposit it into a DeFi contract and receive $1 million in USD coins as a loan, right? While that NFT sits there. So that's what you can do. And so we now have contracts which will accept NFTs as collateral and lend on the back of those NFTs. And it's completely automated, completely decentralized, and so on. And finally, just to describe, I mentioned Ethereum, but there are also other blockchains that we're starting to work with now because Ethereum has become expensive and congested. And in particular, we work with Algorand, but also some of the others on here as well. Finally, we run a meetup in Porto for anyone interested in blockchain, cryptocurrency, and cryptography. We had our last meetup a couple of weeks ago, which was great. We had a really good turnout. And so if anyone's interested, please join the meetup and come and join us in one of the events. And if you want to present on a subject as well, then please reach out. That was it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Adi. We are a bit over time. We have a lot of questions on the chat, but we don't have time to ask them. Sorry. Are you on Umbrella, Adam? Adi, are you?
Yeah, I'm just joining now.
So if you join Umbrella, we have a breakout room on Umbrella about blockchain, and I invite you and everyone interested in discussing blockchain to join that breakout room. So maybe that's the easy way of answering all those questions that were left on the streaming chat. So Adi, thank you very much again for being with us, and thank you everyone. We will now do a small break for lunch and come back at 2 p.m. for the workshops. For those of you that don't have a valid ticket for the workshops, you can still watch them on the streaming, and if not, you can take the time to enjoy the breakout rooms, or please visit our amazing sponsors. So Adi, thank you very much again.
Thank you, Samuel. Pleasure.
See you.
And I can see some great questions, so we'll follow up with that.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.